All right, we'll call the Finance Committee meeting to order. Everybody have a chance to take a look at the minutes?
Yes, there should be, it says Finance Committee member absent, Bill Alms. He was no longer a member, so that should be removed. So I'll move to approve with that change.
Second.
Okay, motion and second to approve for as amended. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. You may have noticed we have a new member of the Finance Committee. Replacing Bill Alms is Joy Knutson. So we were able to make that appointment, so she was able to sit in tonight as we look at some critical financial issues here this evening. Approved claim.
Welcome, Joy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll have a lot of questions, I'm sure. Bear with me.
Oh, we probably should have started sooner.
Yeah, we should have. Right time, right?
Okay, approved claims in the amount of $1,292,921.77.
This includes the boat launch project and street project.
Move to approve.
Second.
Got a motion second to approve. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion on waste management billing issue.
So just an update, Councilor Alms, or Councilor Morissette had asked this last meeting, and I know Councilor Alms was asking about it too before you gone, that we had the issue where waste management had increased the surcharge on the bill. And when it was brought to our attention by mostly citizens saying, what is this? It was not allowed under our agreement with them to do that. So waste management was supposed to either have fixed people's bills when they called in or issued a credit on their coming bill. So we're asking people that if you don't see a credit on your next bill, contact waste management. If they can't fix it, let the city know. We're gonna keep a list and we'll get them fixed for them.
I didn't see every credit, so you will hear from me if I don't see it.
Yep. It's good.
Speaking on behalf of...
Yep.
Yep. Let us know and we'll make sure we work through with waste management what the issue is and what the properties and get them fixed.
All right. Thank you. Yep. Discussion and possible action on police union side agreements to address 2023 wage adjustments.
So with this one, as we've kind of gone through with the budget process and things, one of the things we did catch a little later is that our current union agreements called for the police department to get a 4% increase in 2023, like the rest of the city employees will, but we had a split 2-2, January and July. So to be consistent with all their city employees, we wanted to move that up to January 1. That did have a slight impact on the budget, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but really it turned out to be, after we were able to move a few, just actually eliminate a couple things, about a $4,000 impact, so no real big number impact overall. I think the overall number was only about 20,000. So not a huge impact, but it was the right thing to do to keep all employees kind of on the same structure when they get their cost of living adjustments. So that's why we have to have an agreement to allow it to happen, because this was part of the original union agreement.
Right. So did they ask for this?
It was part of the discussion. Actually, I think one of the officers talked to Councilmember Hall about it. Councilmember Hall gave me a call, and that's when I took a look at it just to make sure where we were at with everything, because I didn't even realize it that it was floating out there, and so that's when we initiated a conversation with them.
And I mean, I don't have an issue with that, but and obviously it doesn't have that huge of an impact on the budget, but it was a bargain for agreement, and that's where I've got a little bit of a concern. Everybody bargained in good faith on that.
Yep. I think the biggest thing with it is that when we did it, I don't think anybody anticipated such a large cost of living adjustment for everyone. You know, this was 2 years ago now. And our big thing with this new agreement was we have a number of large salary adjustments for the PD over the course of the 5 years that we were trying to correct that issue of them being so far behind other departments, things like that. Yeah. So our worry is by not doing this as well, not only the internal equity, but we're not going to get them up to where we want them to be, just because things are going up faster. So that's the only reason for it.
No, and I understand that. I just, I don't want to be, and obviously we are, but this is a precedent being set here that we are going to perhaps essentially renegotiate bargain for agreements.
And we are, you always have that issue that could be there, that something comes up and they bring it up that we missed or that they want to look at, but it always is ultimately up to the Finance Committee and the Council to decide if they want to approve anything or not.
All right.
So they may want to bring something back later, but it doesn't mean you have to do it.
Okay.
Move to approve.
Second.
We got a motion and a second to approve. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion and possible action on salary study.
So we had talked about this, and actually Councilmember Morissette brought it up at the last meeting. We were talking about the budget as far as looking at the salaries and things. So we did go out, get proposals. We received 4 proposals. Flaherty and Hood was the most cost effective by far, and also basically lined up with what we're trying to do. They have good experience in doing these sort of things in a number of cities in our area. And so it seems like a good investment to take a look, to see where we stand, get that information. What the finance committee decides to ultimately do with it, we'll have to see, but it will show that we are trying to take a look to make sure that we're staying competitive with our pay across the board. Over the past few years, we've been trying to address some pay with some positions sort of as we go, but there was always the understanding that we would take a much larger holistic look at all the employees. So that's what the proposal does. Proposal is roughly $12,000. We basically use our health insurance fund, which we kind of use for these sort of one-off personnel related things usually. We also use that fund to help cover the city's share of health insurance increases, but the fund has a very healthy fund balance, so there's no concern with that.
I think it's important that we maintain an aggressive hiring policy as far as wages and salaries. That way we're not continually hiring and trying to look for those people that might not qualify or whatnot. We're going to get the ones that are qualified with more experience, hopefully. And it's just for us to remain competitive, so we're not just a rinse cycle of people. And we want good people, and we want to reward them for what they're doing. It's spread thin enough, so hopefully we can get competitive. I kind of witnessed it when I came down earlier to vote last week, and it's kind of hectic. And it's germane to us getting information as well, just because people are so busy. And I will bring that, because, we got a lot of information today for our council meeting. And I'll bring it up then too, but I think if we have more people, or we could probably get these items faster, and in fairness to us, so we can get ourselves versed on the certain topics that come up, and be educated before we come here. 24 hours, 12 hours, 4 hours, 2 hours before meetings. But I'm getting off topic there, but yes, I agree. So I will move to approve for the salary wage survey.
I'll second it. I think employee morale is important, extremely important, and believing that they are being paid a fair salary is a big part of that morale. So.
And I would agree with that, because we definitely are in a very tough hiring market. It's difficult. We are competing with other municipalities and businesses across the river in Minnesota, so we do need to keep that, because our employees are an important asset to make the city run, to make our lives easier, give the support to our staff. So I think this is money well spent, and what we do with it will take that next step in terms of assessing whether key people need increases or across the board. I mean, we'll have that information to address then. So I agree with your comments.
Well, and you bring up a good point about, we are competitive with the cities in Minnesota, and we need to be aware of what they're paying and how we stack up.
Right.
All right, anybody else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion possible action on 2023 to 2027 capital improvement plan.
So here's the bigger item for conversation just to start. So there's a lot of information that's in the packet. We sent a couple things out. Unfortunately today, I was waiting for a few numbers, so I know a few things came out a little later. But basically, I think what we want to focus on is just sort of the overall concept of what we have proposed for the CIP, and then just what that impact will look like if approved as is on the taxpayers, on our debt levy, things like that. So basically, when COVID hit, we kind of went to a pretty much almost like a 2-year CIP. We sort of really shrunk down what we were doing, just because we were not sure where we were going to come out of it, how things were going to look, things like that. So now that we have a better handle on where things are at, that you know, where we're going to be financially, how the city's growth has sort of really increased over the course during COVID and things like that, we feel more comfortable now bringing back, you know, the usual five-year CIP that the council is used to dealing with. So with that, basically what we have is, you know, 2023 through 2027, although we do have one large 2028 project that's also included in this. So one thing to remember with this is that by approving the CIP, what you're kind of really approving is the next 2 years of projects, 23 and 24, because we do a 2-year bonding cycle for the most part. Although we'll have to do it a little differently this year because we have some big projects in there. We may have to do a couple years where we bond every year, just because it's important for us to stay underneath a total of $10 million in debt issuance every year, because it gives us better rates, things like that. But with that, really what you're doing when you approve this is you're pretty much just saying, okay, we're good with the 23, 24 projects as they're presented. But also to remember with that is that all these 23 and 24 projects, equipment, whatever they are, still come back to the council again for approval. So they'll go out for bids, we'll get proposals, kind of whatever it is. It'll still have to come back to the council to approve again officially, because let's say we have a vehicle in here for $100,000, and all of a sudden with the economy right now, the bids come back in and it's $200,000. Obviously that's going to come back to the council. We'll have to make a decision. Do we cut something else? Do we do this still for $200,000? You know, those sort of things. So by approving it, you're not fully committing to anything, but by approving it, you are basically saying we are proceeding with everything in the 23, 24 years, and that's how the staff will proceed with that then. So with that, to touch on the major points, we have two basically legacy facility projects in the CIP. We've got a new public works facility that we're estimating about $9 million, and we have a new police station at about $8 million. And so generally speaking, you would do projects like these, I don't know, 10 years apart, 15 years more ideally, but just because of where we're at with everything, we're doing them about 5-6 years apart. And it's just really based on need. I think as the council and finance committee knows, the public works facilities are inadequate at best. We're spread out all over the place. They're very outdated. We really do need to look at a consolidated facility with you know, kind of brought more up to modern technology, you know, safe buildings, things like that. On the police side, it all comes down to size. We are already basically almost at capacity at our current facility. We do need to add space for our growing police department. So with that, what we have proposed is a public works facility for $9 million. That would basically, we'd be looking at potentially starting construction later next year in 2023.
Do these include land land acquisitions for both of them?
Yep, we've factored in land acquisition to both. We expect some land acquisition for the public works facility. For the police facility, we don't. What we'd like to try to do is co-locate that with the fire department. Yeah. That's our goal right now. We have some parks storage next to the fire department right now. With the new public works facility, we have no longer a need for that those parks buildings, and so we would use that land, co-locate there, be able to share some of the facilities with the fire department that are already in place, things like that. So we think it's the best use of space for both those buildings if we can locate them close together. So we do have that factored in. So with that, with the public works, we'd be looking at hopefully starting construction on that sometime next year, about a $9 million facility. And then in basically 2028 is when we'd be looking at starting 2027, 2028, just depending on space needs, where we end up, starting that facility at that point. So when you put those two major projects together, I mean, you've got, you know, $17 million in debt bonding right there just for these two major projects. But again, we shouldn't have to deal with facilities after this for a very long time. You know, I think that, you know, for the most part, all of our other facilities are in good shape, or at least they have enough capacity, things like that, that we should not be looking at doing any other major new facility projects for the foreseeable future, 10, 15 years, hopefully, something like that. Then as you look in the 2023-24 projects, there's other minor things in there. We need to replace the front steps at City Hall. We've got our zoning code road update that we had talked about, before, trying to do. We've got our usual things like PC replacements, stuff like that, our usual vehicles that Public Works needs, usual vehicles that our police department needs, things like that. The one thing to note that's a big change from what we usually see in the CIP with facilities, vehicles, things like that, is that generally speaking, we spend about $1.3 million a year for streets. As Dean and Mike Mraz have been, talking with Public Works and Finance and Council about, is that it's not adequate. We're not even keeping up with maintenance at this point. So what this CIP does is phases in increased funding to our streets program. So like I said, right now we average about 1.3 million a year. What we're proposing in this one is that in the years 23 and 24, we'd be spending $2 million a year. And then in the years 25 and 26, we'd up that to $2.5 million a year. And then 27, and potentially moving forward, upping it to $3 million a year. So we're trying to do a slow ramp up of increased funding towards our streets program. I know that at the Public Works Committee, they did ask to look at what would it look like to go to $2.5 million per year right away. And so I did send that out to the council today. While I'm supportive of more money for streets, we just have so much going on right now that what I would like to recommend with that is if we want to do it, that we don't do it right away for 23, but we wait and evaluate it later next year for potentially upping it for 24. Let's kind of see how things play out a little bit first. We just have so much spending right now that adding another $1 million seems like a lot to do on the front end of this. I'd like to see how the $2 million per year goes for at least a year, how many projects we can get done, what that looks like, and then reevaluate, kind of going into next year. So, so basically what we're looking at overall is 2 major facility projects and a big increase in our streets funding over the next 5 years. So with that, what we tried to show was, as you look towards the end of the information in the packet, is we have a nice graph that shows us going up until basically the year 2029. And at that point, it drops off significantly, but we have a lot of debt rolling off as this goes. So while we do have some increases occurring up to that 2029 point, we do have a big drop off coming after 2029. Now, it doesn't mean that we'll never issue new debt after 2029. So we have to realistically expect that we're probably going to want to look at it in 2029. Do we go up to $3.5 million, $4 million a year for streets? Maybe, but that's an answer we'll have to look at that time as we continue to look at the CIP every year. And then on the last page, what we show is basically the tax impact we picked a $400,000 property just as a way to sort of keep a uniform as we go through it. So when you look at that, when you get to our peak, so right now we're roughly at about, if you have a $400,000 property, the debt levy is costing your property about $400 a year, roughly. And when we get to our peak in 2029, that number goes from 400 up to 140. So you're seeing about that, $140 increase. And now that's slowly ramping up as we go with that. So there's not, obviously, no impact with this. You're going to see you're adding debt. You're going to see a tax impact to it, but the number with the major projects, with increase in the street funding and things, the number is not as significant necessarily as I kind of thought it might have been as we go through it. So basically that's sort of where we're at with all of it. We'll continue to look at this every year. The council and the finance committee does review the CIP every year, and it's a 5-year rolling. So every year we'll be reevaluating it again and again. But like I said, at this time, the biggest thing is just getting the feel from the finance committee about what you think of the CIP, if you want to see changes, those sort of things, because we would like to, by the latest early next year, get the full council to sign off on this, because we do have some major project work that we want to make sure if we got it okay for, get the process going, especially for the Public Works facility for final design and bidding. But then we also do need to go out for debt and do that debt issuance.
2 questions. Are we going to front load the possibility on the bond purchase? So we don't have to go back and rebond and then-
So what we have to do is, because of this $10 million cap that we really need to stay under per year, we're going to basically maximize that cap next year. Do as much as we can underneath that, and then the next year we'll do whatever's left in 2024 and bond for that. So we will basically do that, yes.
So we're bonding 2 years in a row,
We will,
which we
because
don't
of
usually
these,
do.
because
Okay.
of the size of the public, just, the Public Works project alone is $9 million. So
Right.
we need to be able to do all the other things as well, we have to split it up between the 2 years.
So we've got almost 13 million for next year.
Yep.
So how will we pay for the other 3 million?
Say that again?
How will
okay,
we
so
pay for the other
what
3
you're saying
million?
is, yep. So basically, what we'll do is so like for the Public Works facility, for example, it's a $9 million project, but we don't pay it up front.
Right.
Okay.
So that project will be paid off over the course of 2 years. So what we'll do basically is we'll have the almost $10 million in funds that come in next year. We'll use it to pay towards whatever progress we've made on the Public Works facility, and the rest will go to the other projects, and then we'll do the rest of the bonding next year. So that's kind of how that'll play out. So we won't have any cash flow real issues because honestly, the majority of that project will probably be happening in 2024.
So my second question was, why 4 vehicles for the police departments when normally it's been 2?
I don't know if
Well,
Jeff
it's
has
been
made it
3.
yet. There was, okay.
Hasn't it been
I'll let
3?
Jeff answer that one. I know Jeff I don't know if Jeff, you had to deal with that too, but Mike is delayed because he witnessed a drunk driving accident and he's still there dealing with that. And I don't know if Jeff had to go deal with that one too.
Yeah, that's where I was too. So the reason we are asking for 4 is because of the significant delays. We were unable to get cars. And obviously our staff has grown, our fleet needs to grow. We lost 2 cars to engine blow-ups last year, so we're too short. So we're trying to catch up.
And we haven't received anywhere close to the ones we ordered last.
No, we found out that we had to order the cars by a certain date this year, or we weren't going to get cars for next year. And the same time we found out that they didn't even build our cars. They just completely took them off the schedule, the ones that we ordered last December. So thankfully, Ford had a couple on their lot that we were able to scoop up.
Okay.
But we're essentially square with where we should have been next year.
Okay, makes
Because of
sense.
that.
I got it.
Okay, that's too bad.
Could I ask about the zoning code update?
Thanks, Jeff.
I know we just passed expenditure to hire Cedar Corp to do zoning review for just under 100,000. What do you anticipate the additional need there for to bring it to 150,000?
We just wanted to make sure we had enough. What we'll do is once we know for sure as they get started that they're not going to anticipate anything additional, we'll actually dial that back to the exact number. We had a higher number in there just in case. So we will dial it back to and that's the other part. Everything you see in here are estimates. So what we'll actually, basically issue debt for pretty much is whatever exactly the bids come in at, whatever exactly we get from state pricing, whatever it is. So we use estimates for now, and we'll finalize hard numbers for sure once we get the actual bids in.
So with the street maintenance, how much would another million in 2024 add to a $400,000 homes tax bill?
So we had the number today. Let me grab it quick.
And if I could just correct, what we talked about was an additional 500,000 a year.
Okay.
So in the 2-year
Total of $1
cycle,
million.
it would be
Oh, okay,
$1 million.
thanks.
Was
Yep.
how it was being discussed.
I got that late and I
Yeah,
didn't
no,
have
that's
time
fine.
to
Thank
It
you.
was late. Sean and I and Josh were going back and forth with numbers. It was fun today. And I feel bad for others because I throw so many different things at them and then things change. I'm like, I gotta do this one. And they're like, well, what are we basing it on? So it was a whole thing. So if we were to do that, so let's say we do the full $1 million that the Public Works Committee asked us to see the number for. So that would mean an additional 500,000 next year, an additional 500,000 in 2024. At the very end of that, I just keep looking at the big picture number. At the peak of 2029, it would go up to 542.80 on that household. And so, again, it's not a huge, maybe direct individual number, but it's $1 million more in debt. And that's where I get concerned about, we've just got so much debt that we're throwing out there right now. And that potential more debt coming in. You know, all things considered, we have a fairly low debt load. As
Right.
we sent to the council, we received a very good bond rating again, with what we'll talk about tonight with our bonds for the TID district for St. Croix Meadows. So we maintain a great rating. Our analyst actually recommended us for a higher one. We didn't get it, which is too bad, but we also understand that those are usually reserved for cities of 100,000 or more. So even for us to get a recommendation of a higher rating was a very good sign on how well we're doing financially. But and part of that is we don't have a huge amount of debt. But I still think to be conservative with our debt, I'd like to wait 1 year before we have that conversation again, to add that potentially another 500,000 to $1 million to the street program.
I'm thinking that it might be prudent to add that to the 2024 projects for now. And then, since we're bonding in 2024,
Yep.
we'll have another discussion, and at that time, we could adjust it down if needed. But if interest rates go down, we may want to increase the debt. So it might be a good idea to just have that in the budget and then see how things turn out and have the discussion a year from now.
Well, I think that's
go
what,
ahead, yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you speak.
What you said, you wanted to get our max on the bond, so we would have that, right? So we'd only bond once.
No, for 23, we'll have basically about 10 million in debt we'll issue, and then in 24, we'll do the difference. And so I think what Councilmember Hall is saying, that we could at least put in the CIP that additional 500,000 for 2024 for now, but we wouldn't actually be making that decision until maybe the end of next year when we do, because we're going to do bonding 2 years, which is unusual for us to do bonding 2 years in a row.
That's what I'm saying.
One
Yep.
point I just wanted to make is something that we definitely discovered this year on Public Works was that projected or desired improvement projects came in way over budget. We couldn't afford to do everything we wanted to do because of the cost, just like you hear about the cost of construction going up.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely the cost of asphalt, because it's a petroleum-based product, was very expensive this year. Will that get better? Perhaps your idea would work well, Joyce, to say, let's look at it again another year. Hopefully we would have a more realistic number of what is it costing, rather than going out and let's spend this money and improve some streets on a year that it might cost us more than it should. So I like your idea of putting it off for another year and considering it then.
I don't mind. I agree with you, Aaron, is that this whole economic kind of picture right now is very scary to a lot of people. And here we are talking about millions of dollars, and people are struggling to get gas in their tanks and food and all that stuff. And now we're going to talk about these big ticket items. So I really think we got to take it slow. We all identified that we are behind in our projects, but we have to be smart for the people's money without going gangbusters. So putting some restraints on is huge right now, and it just perception's reality, and I don't want to look like that. We all know these things need to be taken care of, but let's spread it out as best we can.
So is it better to have something in this CIP and take it out a year from now, so that we can make plans for that? Or is it better to leave it out and add it a year from now?
I think at this point, it's probably better to leave it out and then potentially add it in. Just because, we're basing a lot of the planning on, hopefully this is what we're really going to be doing, that sort of thing. So I think I would rather just see it left out. Let's reevaluate next year when we talk about this, and then decide if we want to put it back in or not.
Okay.
Knowing that it could be there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm certainly not anxious to increase the property taxes. They're so high as it is. But we are so far behind on these projects. Also, Joy made a really good point about the cost of the projects. I mean, we had to have our roof replaced, and it was more than 50% more. So we had it replaced 2 years ago, and then we had it replaced this summer, and it was more than 50% more to have it replaced this summer. So
I'm going to take this opportunity to chime in a little bit. All of you sitting at this table know very well the challenges we have as a city about our state funding, and it's real, and it hits this kind of discussion. Randy's struggling.
Well, if we got a better bond rating, it'd be worse.
Yes, it's true, but we have, I mean, when you look at people talk about, well, it's not fair and we don't get it, but people a lot of times don't know the numbers. For example, the shared revenue from the state, you know, that's where our income tax goes to the state of Wisconsin, our property taxes, the sales tax that's collected in the city limits goes to the state, and they give us back a portion that they have a very convoluted formula that they calculated. And you know, I think it's fairly shocking when you find out that Hudson gets, what, 150, 160,000? Let's take 200,000 for round numbers. We might get that much back from the state based on what we've paid in, you know, returned to us. The city of River Falls gets 2 million. That's 10 times as much money that they get. So then their decisions about making a building and doing road improvements are a lot easier for them because they get that money. Now, that is a long-standing formula, which I don't suppose we're going to change right off, but I think our residents need to know about it. You're right, Randy. We have to be sensitive about raising taxes, but people also need to be aware of some of the inequities that are present. Our sales tax that's collected, you know, the county has a 0.5% added on, and that goes directly to them, not to us, even though it's our businesses. We're plowing the streets for those stores that collect that sales tax. So it's a challenge, and the city of Hudson will always be assumed to be rich. You know, we have money. We are a net payer. We give more than we receive to the state, and this is where it hits, is when we've got to do these big projects. And yes, it's going to lead to some painful, hopefully not too painful, tax increases, and we just need to be aware of it. But I want, again, I know all of you know that, but I think it's helpful just to be saying it so that our residents understand it as well.
Yeah, that's one of the things when we talked about, I think I sent something to council maybe this summer at some point when we looked at mill rates. We have the lowest mill rate of, I think, 10 or so cities that we had Ehlers compare us to, but we have the highest per capita tax because we don't get that state aid. So while our mill rate is very low, which is a great sign of the city keeping its budget and its levy very low and having a very high property tax value, we still have to tax more than other jurisdictions like us because they get way more state aid than we do. And that's just the bottom line, which is why the big thing that we can control is the amount that we budget and levy.
Yes, and I know that you and the department heads have worked hard at keeping that levy, and that is a concern. Certainly whatever we borrow or bond for is going to need to be paid for out of that levy. Operational expenses, they're pretty lean and mean right now, so, you know, that is appreciated. Hopefully we can continue going forward without too much difficulty there. Anyway, off my soapbox.
We just have to have a good strategy moving forward and be conscious of the economic environment right now.
Yes, because the one thing I want to stress with this is that tax impact we show on this, that's just for the debt side. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we're going to have an operating levy as well. Right. So, you know, when we start approving these projects, just know that we're basically locking in that, you know, for 2023, or 2024, I should say, when this kicks in, this is what our levy is going to go up baseline just for the debt that we just issued, that sort of thing. So, you know, the council has to recognize that there's two sides of this. There's the operating levy and the debt levy. We're talking about the debt levy, but know that we're not going to come back with a zero. Maybe, I mean, we've done it before, but I doubt we'll come back with a 0% operating levy increase. So we'll have to, you know, we have to put the two together to show the total impact for our taxpayers.
So, and that's my concern, is the operating, because that's what puts us in jeopardy with levy limits. Yep. And especially, I mean, we might be coming into a situation where if there's any type of revaluation, our property values may take a hit here, and then we've got a real serious problem. And that's my biggest concern, is future operating expenses. So maybe something a little more mundane and not as lofty as the future prospects for our debt service. But when we talk about the public works building and relative to the disparate facilities that we have right now, will we realize an operating savings with one building
I would assume we will. I mean, just from the ability to have everything in one place. Everybody goes to one place. We're not taking vehicles and moving them around during the course of the year.
Right.
We should see an operating savings side by having one building.
Okay,
yes.
but we don't have.
See,
it now.
well,
I don't have a
Cedar
number.
Corp, you know, it's been 2 years. I'm looking at Mike Morales, Public Works Director, but, you know, they were hired to do evaluation 2 years ago. Maybe they started in 2019 and presented 2020. But they had at that time estimated $50,000 a year in savings, just because right now our Public Works building is on the far northwestern corner of the
Right.
city.
Yep.
We're not annexing or doing anything beyond Lake Malibu. And really, the city's growth is going to the south and the east, southeast. And so if we get that Public Works building more centrally located, that will certainly save time and money and possibly help us keep our staffing at the current levels. You know, we're going to, if people are running back and forth across town to get equipment or different things, that slows down the work and eventually might need to expand the staff. I think the Public Works Department has stayed pretty consistent the last few years with staffing, and again, our city footprint is getting bigger. So we need that operational capacity, and the projected location will be much more central.
Okay.
And hopefully with the new facility, we'll see some energy efficiency savings as
Right.
well. We'll try
Yeah.
to make it a more efficient building. We'll try to see that, because as you know, with our facilities right now, there's not much energy efficiency going on.
Right.
So we hopefully on top of just the savings of the driving, we might see more, but I don't know what that number will be.
Okay.
I have 2 more questions. First of all, do you have an idea of what the other property tax entities are planning, like the county, the school district, the technical college?
Well, not as far as like next year, what their operating levy things are. I mean, I think, big picture, the school's looking at some probable, referendum sort of situations, that the county has a very large project that's coming into play, that debt service is going to be coming on as well. But as far as their just general overall levies next year, I have not seen anything yet from the school or the county yet.
Okay. Then, once we're done with the Public Works project, for the new facility, would we sell the properties where the current garages are?
That would be our intent, is that we don't really have any use for them. I mean, obviously it's a council decision what to do with them, but I think staff would recommend we don't need them. We should probably sell them and see what kind of revenue we can get from them, which potentially could help offset some of these debt service payments and actually prepay some of the bonds as well if we wanted to go that route.
What do you think the value of those properties would be? Do you have any idea?
I don't know. I mean,
Okay.
probably more a year ago than today. And, maybe, I don't know for sure though. Yeah, it's hard to say.
Okay, thanks.
That's a can of worms.
Yeah.
It's a mess.
We have a motion?
Would it behoove us to do a 2-year, or do you want to do the 5?
Like I said, the 5 is just to give everyone a long-range view of it,
And we
but
can
we're not
change.
committing to anything really outside of the first 2 years. And like I said, even in those first 2 years, they will still come back for final approval from the council. So I still like the idea of approving the 5, knowing that everything outside of 2 years, even at this point outside of 1 year, but for your sake, outside of 2 years is really just an estimate. We're not committing anything to that. We're not putting any funding towards it. It's just part of our plan, so we can internally plan for it, and as council members that these are potentially coming. So I do like still the 5-year.
Okay, I'll make the motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Got a motion, second to approve. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. I don't have anything for the future. Anybody?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Got a motion, second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. We stand adjourned. Thanks, everybody. We'll take a couple minutes and get the council meeting started.